So good evening and welcome. Beautiful people, thank you for showing up and being present for this evening's gather round. I'm going to be speaking to Andrew Barnes about the power of Tantric Body De-Armouring. It's a hot and juicy topic, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation this evening. I would also love to welcome you to turn your camera on. If that is at all possible for you, we'd love to be able to see your face and to connect with you. So if you're able to, please do turn your camera on. And whilst we're waiting for people to land in the Zoom room, I can just ask you to mute yourself as you come into the Zoom room. Lena, is everyone else hearing me okay? Can you give me a thumbs up? Awesome. So Lena, I think that might be sound on your side if you could try troubleshooting. So whilst we're waiting for people to land in the Zoom room, I just really invite you to look around you and see what your space needs for your absolute comfort and pleasure over the next 90 minutes or so. If you're in Cape Town, you need to keep warm. Have you got a hot drink? What do you need to be comfortable? Really take care of yourself and the needs of your beautiful body. And so we're expecting a good showing out of people tonight. And of course, you will all receive the call recording tomorrow. So we're expecting people to join us as our conversation progresses, and that's perfectly fine. So I just wanted to say a few things before I hand over to Andrew. I guess I wanted to introduce Andrew and just say that when I first met him at the Sacred Sexuality Conference in Cape Town, which was back in 2010, and then when Shakti Malan, the founder of the Shakti Shiva Academy, invited Andrew to co-facilitate a body de-armoring workshop together with her in 2011, I am so glad that I said yes to participating in that first body de-armoring retreat in South Africa, actually, because I totally fell in love with the modality. And I'd say that it's been truly transformational in my personal journey. And actually, I'd use the word transmutational in really supporting me to reclaim the bliss that is my birthright, and that I know to be all of our birthrights. And yeah, Shakti was at that time pivoting more fully into focusing on writing her book, Sexual Awakening for Women. She encouraged me to continue to invite Andrew to South Africa, which I did. And together we've been creating intimate retreat spaces for vulnerable and embodied sharing. For the last 14 years now, Andrew has visited South Africa every year except 2021, which was the year that COVID shut the world down. Yeah, in fact, actually, when COVID came online, Andrew and I, together with a fabulous group of about 40 other humans, were together at a beautiful retreat venue in South Africa called Bodhi, and we were on a 9-day Tantric Body De-Armouring retreat. And we were unraveling and undoing ourselves whilst most of the world was plummeting into fear. We were breathing and dancing and moving and loving and exploring good vibrations and so much pleasure. And yeah, that's where we were when COVID hit the world. It was a very fascinating place to be viewing events as they unfolded from this really high vibration, connected state of oneness. And in fact, Andrew got locked down in South Africa for 3 whole months, the first 3 months of lockdown. He was here with us in South Africa. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is that Andrew has been a way shower for me. He has really shown me that living the life we love and loving the life we live is possible when we're willing to follow the knowing of our tender human hearts and when we have the courage to simply follow our bliss. And it's really wonderful for me to be hosting this call. It feels like finally I've wanted to have Andrew on a gather round for a very long time, and we finally are here live with all of you beautiful people. So thank you, Andrew, for agreeing to share with us about one of your great passions, body de-armoring. So I'm going to pop, before I hand over to Andrew, I'm going to put a brief outline of our call, just so that everyone has an awareness of how our time together will unfold. And yeah, over to you, Andrew, to just say something about yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all here and to see some familiar faces. And thank you, Rianne, for that very nice introduction. I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to sharing with people a little bit about my experience of the Tantric Body De-Armouring, and also its, like, hopefully its evolution into how it is experienced nowadays compared to 20 years ago. And I'm also looking forward to, if anyone has any questions that they've wanted asked, hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions for you tonight.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make that a little bit more user-friendly to read.
Okay.
But I'll do that in a moment. So yeah, let's jump right in, Andrew. And why don't you share, like what inspired you? How did you first encounter body de-armoring, and why did it grab you so deeply? And how did your personal expression come about?
Yeah, it's quite a long story, so I'll try and keep it concise though. In 1998, I was very fortunate to become the apprentice of a woman who teaches a very dynamic type of massage and body work. And I assisted her on about 40 retreats over a 3.5-year period. And she taught me so much about deep tissue body work and moving energy through the body and awakening the body to vitality, and how to do deep tissue emotional release within the body. And that was a really powerful platform for my starting to muse about creating something that was related to supporting people to prepare their bodies for going into tantric experiences. I was very fortunate when I was quite young, when I was about 22, to discover Taoist and tantric practices. But because I was holding so much physical and emotional stress in my own body from my own unresolved trauma from a lifetime, I found it very difficult to go into these expanded, high vibrational, orgasmic states that I'd read about in these Taoist and Tantric textbooks. And so over the next several years, I did a lot of healing around my emotional states and releasing a lot of the physical tension in my body. And I started to get the results by being able to explore these high vibrational tantric states and seeing the experiences that people were having on my teachers' retreats with regards to the very powerful emotional releases. I started to think about how could I integrate this into supporting people to prepare their bodies for these tantric and Taoist experiences that most of us can only imagine or read about in books or see in movies. And at the time, I was also reading information from someone called Wilhelm Reich. Sorry, I can't pronounce his name properly. Hopefully you can understand his name. And he was around in the early 1900s and was a protege of Sigmund Freud. And he started exploring sexuality and, you know, its impact on our spirituality and on our body and how it could empower us, and the power of orgasm and the function, or he called it in one of his books, the function of orgasm. And I found his books and his information quite profound at the time. And interestingly, he was finally banned from the European Psychotherapy Association because of his ideas, or a lot of his ideas, and he ended up going to America, where he continued with his research and his and books. And interestingly, one of his books, I'm pretty sure it's The Function of Orgasm. I can't quite remember at the moment. It's the only book that the American government has publicly burnt. And so I have tremendous respect for the work that he's done, and from the information that I've read in his books. And he coined the term that people armor themselves. We armor ourselves physically, emotionally, energetically. And so when I was coming up with this idea of trying to integrate this deep tissue body work into supporting people to prepare their bodies and their nervous system to be able to go into these high vibrational states, I kind of wanted to name it in honor of Wilhelm Reich. So that's where the term de-armoring came from, because he coined the term that we armor ourselves. And back then it was actually called Emotional Body De-Armouring, but I changed the name in 2010, I think it was, or 2009, to Tantric Body De-Armouring. But that's essentially how it began, and what its purpose has pretty much stayed that way the entire time, is to prepare people's bodies to release physical and emotional stress that keeps them held in low vibrational states of consciousness. And when they're able to release this physical and emotional stress and empower themselves in ways that we can talk about during this talk, then it makes it safe for their body and their nervous system to start to gradually move into these very powerful and very profound and even magical states of consciousness, these altered states of consciousness, where we can begin to use our sexual energy as a platform for our spirituality, as a platform for awakening dormant parts of our brains, as a platform for expanding our consciousness in ways that that we possibly could never have imagined or only read about in books. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a taster of it.
Yeah, that's a really good introduction, and something that you speak to a lot is cultivating high vibrational states. And it's something that I'm super curious about. I really, in my work with people, also see that we all have a longing for more sensation, for more pleasure, for more bliss, and to feel those in our bodies. And so when you speak about cultivating high vibrational states, could you say a little bit more about exactly what you mean and then how we do that?
Yeah, so as I was saying, physical and emotional stress keeps people held in low vibrational states of consciousness. And there's a really great book that talks about this. It's called Power versus Force by David Hawkins, I think is his name. And he measures people's vibrational frequency in different emotional states. And so, of course, as you would imagine, when someone's in anger or fear or envy or jealousy or those kinds of states, that their vibrational frequency is very low. And so it's very easy for them to experience mental stress, physical illnesses. It lowers the immune system, our ability to ward off infections and inflammation and things like that. It's much easier to get into unhealthy addictive patterns. But then if you read his book, once people start moving into relaxation and calm and into bliss or pleasure, orgasm, bliss states, things like that, then their vibrational frequency begins to increase, and their body begins vibrating at a different frequency, which you can actually feel within your own body. And then, of course, that changes your mental and emotional states. So one of the things that I started doing way back then was mapping certain muscles in the body that I sensed related to sexual stress. And of course, that's nothing new. A lot of modalities that have come from Wilhelm Reich have assessed, the body and its posture and movement and how that relates to our emotional states. I think one of the things that I brought into the Tantric Body De-Armouring with that was to connect it with trigger point therapy. And so once I started mapping the different muscles in the body, and some of those are in the jaw and in the skull, in the chest, in the front of the spine. Of course, most people have probably heard of the iliopsoas muscle, and it's a main muscle that gets released in Tantric Body De-Armouring experiences. But by mapping out these muscles, what I started to find was that people were able, once they had this physical and emotional stress, and these muscles were starting to function in a much more natural way without any resistance from the trigger points, that people were able to start to cultivate and circulate their sexual energy through their bodies, meaning that they were not just feeling pleasure within the genital area, but they could start to feel pleasure anywhere in their body. And I guess this led to me starting to understand it this way, that every cell in our body is made of the same thing. And when we know how to use breath, sound, and movement in the way that the Tantric or Taoist textbooks talk about, we're able to change the vibrational frequency of every cell in our body. And so if we're able to move into an experience where we're cultivating and circulating our sexual energy through our entire body, then every cell in our body can start vibrating at that orgasmic frequency. And that's a very profound meditation. And in my experience, it's an essential part of our spirituality. Because when we're able to move into those extended states of consciousness for a period of time, where our entire body is vibrating at that orgasmic frequency, dormant parts of our brain start to reactivate. For most of us, when we're just living a normal life in our day-to-day activities, getting up, going to work, doing the same thing over and over each day, we don't need to use our full capacity. And so parts of our brain or awareness start to turn off, so to speak. And meditation, and in my experience, these types of sexual meditations where we're able to move this energy and get every cell in our body vibrating at this orgasmic frequency, start to reactivate these dormant parts of the brain. And in my experience, when that happens, people are able to start to develop extrasensory perceptions and awarenesses. People start to become more intuitive. People start to become more intelligent in ways, more empathic in ways, more compassionate in ways, more loving in ways. Because, and that's why I see our sexuality as an essential part of our spirituality, because it really opens us up to this, to having this much more expansive and open experience of life, but also the relationships that we're having with ourselves and also with other people.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm curious to know, or what I see when we enter into the high vibrational states is that all bodies, all cells, all bodies behave or display very similarly. So whether we're in male bodies, female bodies, which are similarly different, and they're different pathways in the de-armoring and into the pleasure. But when we do reach those high vibrational states, that all bodies, all cells are expressing and responding very similarly.
Yeah,
Have you
it's a very
found
powerful,
is that
it's a very,
your experience too?
yeah, it's a very powerful experience when our entire body comes into alignment with this vibrational frequency.
Mm.
And it's a very transformative experience. And so I guess I've been very passionate about that, about creating an environment for those experiences to happen. But I think, you know, what's happened for me over the last several years, especially since going through an accountability process and really trying to understand in a much deeper and nuanced way around being trauma informed, etc., is how during retreats is it possible for people to have these very profound and traumative experiences, transformative experiences, while still being able to maintain self-regulation and also their own personal agency and empowerment. Because, you know, what happened on my retreats in the past, and I've also seen happen on other people's retreats, is that this sort of motivation to move in a very sort of high speed, in a very impactful way to try and create these very powerful experiences when people's bodies and people's nervous systems aren't actually ready for that experience. And so one of the things that has been evolved
Mm.
for Tantric Body De-Armouring is really integrating the ability to understand that each person is on their own journey within the Tantric Body De-Armouring retreats, and moving at a pace that enables people to make very healthy choices for themselves and to really have clarity within themselves about what's their capacity for experience in any moment on the retreats. And so there's a lot of emphasis and support on the retreats for people to really stay connected with that, with their inner truth and their inner awareness of knowing what their capacity is, or sensing what their capacity is with each experience, with each exercise, with each de-armoring session that they might receive or give during the retreat. And so that's become a very integral part of the retreats, is ensuring that we're not goal orientated as facilitators or practitioners, and just because someone is coming for a Tantric Body De-Armouring retreat doesn't mean that they're going to have that experience that other people may have had. We need to really adapt the experience to meet individuals where they're at. But not only that, as I said, support them to have their personal agency so that they're able to lead me or the facilitator or practitioner through the session. So they're the ones that are guiding where they're touched, how they're touched, the pressure that they're touched. These are all really essential parts of Tantric Body De-Armouring nowadays, because that is one of the foundations of having a Tantric Body De-Armouring experience, is really learning how we need to be able to empower ourselves, maintain our personal agency, even in a situation where there is a power differential. And of course, on a tantric retreat or in any type of tantric session, there's always going to be that power differential where there's the teacher and the client or the student, etc. And so all of that needs to be really addressed in a very conscious way in the sessions or in the retreats. And that needs to be the first thing that's addressed. And so making sure that we're not goal orientated, or I'm not goal orientated, to try and make sure that this this particular experience happens, because there's all of this other really powerful and important things that need to happen to support and prepare a person to be able to then safely go into those expanded states of consciousness while not losing themselves in the experience, so they can stay grounded within themselves. And so that's something that I think is, the evolution of Tantric Body De-Armouring that's been really, really essential. And unfortunately, in the early days, it was missing.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the benefit of jumping in the deep end, and I've certainly benefited from myself from that approach at times. And I've also benefited hugely from titrating and just staying in the comfort zone, at the edge of the comfort zone, not pushing beyond the comfort zone. And so it's not about right or wrong. Both have merit, but it is about taking the finest care with ourselves, because we've all had such different ranges of trauma, and our nervous systems are wired for trauma very uniquely. And so really being informed and understanding that when we're working with groups has been a real evolution, I think, for all of us working in this embodied field.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I want to just read you a question that Leslie from Vancouver, Washington has popped into the chat. She says, Andrew, have the brain waves been documented in these high vibrational states? And if so, are they gamma brain waves?
I'm not sure if, hi Leslie, I'm not sure if that's the case. Maybe there has been some studies, but I haven't gone in that direction with this. I've really based my understanding of this through personal experience and also feedback from people that have had personal experiences. But it is a really good question. And I have been motivating myself to start doing that research, but I've been quite focused for the last couple of years on writing another book, an anatomy textbook called Demystifying Female Genitalia. But now that that book is finished, I'm psychologically preparing myself to start researching these particular topics to see what science does have to say about it.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to let everybody know that you're welcome to pop any questions into the chat, and we'll also have some time for you to unmute yourself and come and engage with Andrew and deepen in your inquiry into Tantric Body De-Armouring. I'm just looking at the different screens, and it's so wonderful to see I don't know if you're noticing, Andrew, how many people have been on retreat with us in South Africa, and that just warms my heart to see the community that over the years has built, and how many people have returned to 1, 2, 3, and even more retreats because they have personally found this work, the Tantric Body De-Armouring, and then move, once that foundational piece has been done, to really move on to the energetic full body orgasm, which of course we don't really have access to until we do our personal work of letting go of our personal body de-armoring.
Right. Yeah, hi everybody. It is really nice to see familiar faces. But yeah, I think, most people that I speak to are wanting to really explore these tantric types of experiences that we read about in books, or we see in movies, or we hear people on the internet talking about it. But for a lot of us, it can feel like it's a very long way away. Like it seems like a long journey to be able to experience those things. And so really exploring our bodies through these types of de-armoring retreats, really, in my experience, it makes it possible for people to prepare their nervous systems to be able to tolerate the type of pleasure that can run through our bodies, that can move through our bodies in these altered states of consciousness. And I think that we really have to do that in a very gradual, step-by-step way, because most of us are being conditioned to really only experience very small amounts of pleasure. I read a study once that the average American married couple has sex for about 7 minutes. And, the orgasmic experience that they have may only last for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds maximum. So that's really teaching our nervous system, that to only be able to tolerate very, very small amounts of pleasure. And so, of course, when we're able to access this current of energy, this life force energy that can move through our bodies, like an expanded orgasmic state can be a very deep meditation that goes for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And that could be quite overwhelming for our nervous systems if we haven't prepared it for those types of experiences. It can like burn out our nervous system. And so what I've tried to do over the years on the Tantric Body De-Armouring retreats is create very particular experiences through breath, sound, movement, dance, and meditation. And of course, the body work, the trigger point release in the de-armouring, as a way to prepare the nervous system to tolerate this large capacity of pleasure that can move through our bodies. And so we do a lot of different types of meditations, solo meditations, and sometimes if a person is feeling drawn to do different breathing or eye gazing meditations with other people that really support the strengthening of our nervous system. And the intuitive dance and the emotional release dance also really supports us to start to create new pathways within our brain and body that will really enhance this our ability to be able to cultivate and circulate our sexual energy in the ways that Tantra and Taoism talks about.
Yeah, I think that cultivating or high vibrational states and expanded states of consciousness, it's quite intriguing how paradoxical it is that we're most of us so unable to tolerate high levels of pleasure and bliss in our bodies and our nervous systems, and how we have to learn, and how we have to really want to intentionally step into and reclaim that bliss that is our birthright.
Yeah, because I mean, most of us were not taught, how to explore these very deep, powerful practices And, you know,
Mm.
sexuality in most people's societies are not promoting this, you know, this very embodied spiritual approach to our sexuality. And so I think what these types of retreats can support people to do is really reconnect with that sacredness within their bodies and within their own sexuality, and really start to experience it as this life force energy that can become a very creative way to live, so that it can motivate us to love more in the world and to move more intuitively in the world. You know, for a lot of us, our sexuality is for uh, emotional intimacy, relationship, reproduction, stress release, and entertainment. And of course, there's nothing wrong with those things. They're great, and any pleasure is good pleasure. But but in my experience and the feedback that I've gotten from other people is that when we're able to really access this powerful life force energy, sex takes on a very different understanding for us. And it's like most people, or everyone really, is longing for that returning home to their spiritual sexuality, but we're not quite sure how to do that. And I think that that's one of the things that tantric practices and Taoist practices can really support us to do, is to return home to self and reconnect our heart with our sexuality and reconnect our spirit with our sexuality, so that we can start to live from a much more expanded place within our life, which then, of course, is going to enrich our relationships. It's going to enrich our creativity. It's going to enrich all areas of our life, our careers, you know, how we're moving in the world. It's a really fascinating journey.
Yeah, it's been my experience that the more access I have to pleasure through my own breath and sound and movement and interaction with others energetically and physically, that the the more intentionally I'm creating my life, and the more I'm creating the life that I really, really want to live, and
Yes.
also a life that all of us really, really want to live. And that's a beautiful thing to, I feel very privileged in my life to be in this place and living at this level. Yeah, it feels like creating the world that we really, really, really want to live in together is what we can do right now on this planet.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And it's a really beautiful invitation to all of us to, yeah, to get on board with that and create a fabulous life for all beings.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. Andrea, there are a couple of questions coming
Oh,
through, so I'm going to read
questions.
a couple of them out because I think it's really nice to engage with what's here, what's showing
Yes.
up in the room. Um, Melandre asks, can you please say something about safety and pleasure threshold and how to break through that versus pain threshold? We seem to be more comfortable with pain. Only in feeling deeply safe can I feel pleasure.
Yeah, and that's a really important foundation of Tantric Body De-Armouring retreats, is about how as a facilitator, and how can the retreat support people to be able to create safety for themselves? How can the retreat support people to be able to be in their own self-agency, so that they can really get a sense of what their body needs in each moment, and how to ask for what they want and how to say no to what they don't want in each moment. And I think that the more that people are able to develop that self-agency, the more that it's respected by those around them as well, then the body starts to feel safer to relax and open to these more expanded experiences. And so, you know, I think in the old days, on a lot of people's retreats, there was this sort of emphasis on everyone had to participate. Everyone had to do all of the exercises in the way that they were said. And of course, that's not supporting safety for each individual. And so, of course, now what we need to do is modify the exercises to suit each individual. And that's definitely possible to do. And what that does is it really creates a safer environment for people to then create safety for themselves, because there isn't that external sort of peer group pressure from the facilitator and or other participants for everyone to jump into the deep end of the pool. So I think that that's a really important part of it. And then once that safety is there, I think the body naturally wants to start to move out of pain. I think sometimes the pain that we're experiencing in our body is almost like a protective mechanism, because we're not ready to move into these new experiences that I was talking about before, these high vibrational ecstatic states. And so the body will hold on to pain in a sense to keep our vibration low so that we don't get overwhelmed by these experiences. And so by gradually, you know, moving at a pace that suits us as an individual, and that might mean, you know, repeating a level 1 retreat several times. It might mean, you know, doing some of the exercises on the retreat and not doing others, and then going away and exploring those exercises in your own home when you feel ready to, at the depth that you feel ready to. So I think as we gradually support ourselves to feel safe through agency, being able to communicate, to set our boundaries clearly, to maintain our boundaries, to ask for what we want, to say no to what we don't want, even from a facilitator where there's a clear power differential, then our body just, it wants to move out of pain and into pleasure. It wants to start to release this physical and emotional and mental stress that is keeping us in pain. Because I think that our natural state does tend to want to be in more of a bliss state than this pain state. But unfortunately, the pain state is very addictive on one level. But in my experience and the feedback that I've gotten from other people, most of us were not taught how to be in these expanded states when we were growing up. We were sort of taught to be in that level of pain, that low level state of consciousness where stress becomes the normal. I'm not sure if that answers your question though.
I think it's a good beginning of an answer. And I'd like to add that in my experience, of course, external safety is really important, but safety is also the inside job. It's our job to create safety for ourselves. And I feel that that's the dance of the inner masculine and feminine, that the masculine creates presence. My masculine creates that presence so that the essence of my feminine receptivity can allow me to enter into a bliss state. And that's my personal experience of the dance. So I hope that's helpful for you, Melandre.
Definitely. And creating safety is, you know, it's a learned behavior. And so it's something that we need to continue to practice. And as facilitators and practitioners, we need to continue to support people to develop that ability for clients or participants to create that safety for themselves. To me, that is more important than doing a body de-armoring session on somebody, you know, being goal orientated toward this particular experience. Because when someone really gets that piece that they actually can have agency, even in state where there's a power differential, then their body is much more open and sensitive. It just very quickly becomes much more open and sensitive. And someone just wrote, I think in the comments,
Yes.
witnessing then becomes very important. And absolutely, it's, you know, there's something very beautiful and very sacred about witnessing someone that's in their agency, that's in their self-love, that's caring for themselves, that's able to lead themselves in these types of experiences. It's very beautiful. It's, to me, it's deeply spiritual. I'm sorry if there's dogs barking in the background. I'm actually in Bulgaria at the moment, and I've just finished running a Tantric Body De-Armouring retreat here, and I'm still at the retreat venue. And around this time at night, all the local dogs start having a little party. And I'm not sure if you can hear the barking, but it's quite loud here.
Teeny tiny bit. Beautiful retreat center, it looks like you're at, Andrew.
Yeah, it's very sweet. I have no idea where I am in Bulgaria, but it's very beautiful.
Yeah. So Mariam asks, she'd like to ask about how to access higher levels of pleasure in solo tantric experiences. Do you have any tips or recommendations for her to start?
Yeah, I think that it's very important to practice doing sensual meditations. That's a good solo practice that people can do at home, where they have the time and the space, they can lay down, get very comfortable, play some beautiful music, and just very gently start asking their body, what does their body need to feel safe and open, to feel sensual energy starting to move through the body. And, you know, in Tantra, we say breath, sound, and movement. And this can be a really helpful way of starting to access that sensual energy in our body, is through letting our body start to move in ways that feel sensual, letting our body start to breathe in ways that feel sensual, letting our body make sounds in ways that feel very sensual. And I think that that's the best place to start, rather than trying to go in, you know, to get from 0 to 100 in one go. I think, you know, the pathway starts with body awareness and safety. And then that can move into the pathway of sensuality. And then sensuality is the pathway towards pleasure. Pleasure is the pathway towards orgasm. And orgasm is the gateway for expanding consciousness. And so I think that that's the good place to start. And by using breath, sound, and movement, we're also supporting our body to release physical and emotional stress and raise our vibration. Breath, when we're breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, giving a sound of a sigh on the out breath, that really helps to raise the vibration in the body and to release stress. Sound is very powerful and effective in releasing emotional stress, and movement is very powerful and effective in releasing physical stress. So by exploring the sensual meditation, we're really supporting our whole being in many ways, to release physical and emotional stress, to raise our vibration, to access this sensual energy, which is the beginnings of the pathway to pleasure and to orgasm, and then expanding into you know, these orgasmic altered states of consciousness.
Carolina's asking if you could repeat that pleasure root, the root of pleasure again, Andrew.
Is that Corinne? Hi, Corinne. It's really nice.
Carolina.
Sorry, what was the question?
Um, in your explanation or answer now, you talked about a route of pleasure. Sensuality leads to pleasure, pleasure to orgasm, and she's just asking if you could repeat that.
Right. So initially, we create safety for ourselves. And from creating safety, the body can relax and then open to sensuality. And sensuality is the pathway to pleasure.
Mm.
And pleasure is the pathway to orgasm. And orgasm is the gateway for expanding consciousness and even reconnecting to what I call the unified field of consciousness or God, whatever you want to call it, to this incredible experience of being alive and in a body. It really opens us up to a much more expanded understanding or awareness of this fascinating experience of being alive and having, what we call consciousness, even though we don't really know what that is.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and breath, sound, and movement is definitely a mantra of yours, Andrew.
Right.
And we do a lot of it on retreat, and we also do a lot of solo practices on retreat to just let people know that a lot of the practices that we do are together but solo. So it's not all partnered and paired work. A lot of it is cultivating our own pleasure pathways and our own awareness, our own consciousness. So
Yeah,
just to
this is
clarify.
this for me, that's a really good point. Thank you, Rianne, because the way that I see this is that, when we're exploring tantric practices with somebody else, I understand it that we're sharing that experience with each other, that we're sharing energy with each other. And so that means that initially, it's very important that we're able to access and cultivate and circulate this sexual energy within ourselves. And so a lot of the practices on the retreats are really about supporting ourselves to really awaken this ability within our own bodies. That's such a beautiful gift that we can give to ourselves, is to be able to access this energy consciously. And then, of course, when we are with our partners in a lovemaking experience, then rather than coming together to get something from each other, we're coming together in a very beautiful, sacred way to share this very powerful life force energy that's moving through our bodies with each other. And then, of course, in those experiences, we can then elevate the experience or the expansion of energy even more. And so on the Tantric Body De-Armouring retreats, that's why a lot of the practices are solo, because we really need to be able to consciously access this energy, and then we can share it with others. And that's, to me, when these very beautiful tantric experiences that we read about in books or see in Hollywood movies or whatever can actually become a reality of our experience.
Yeah. So, Mariam, I'm going to hold your question and just jump to Cameron. So, Cameron, Andrew, as a male, he says he finds himself suppressing his sexuality for most of his life. He's treating sexuality as taboo and resisting desire and pleasure in so many ways. And he's been working a lot to release emotional trauma and has had some profound somatic releases, but asks does he actually start walking the path of sacred sexuality?
To me, it sounds like you already are, Cameron. It's, for each of us has our own journey through our sexuality. I certainly have had my journey, and it's been a very slow journey. I actually wish people slow journeys, because the slower the journey, the more we can integrate each new learning that we experience on that journey. And very often, the slower the journey, the more people we can meet that can really support us to understand ourselves in a much deeper and richer way, but also to expand our experiences in a much deeper and richer way. So it sounds like you are on the path. It's just about accepting where you're at in each moment. And if you keep on moving in the direction that you're intuitively drawn to move into and keep empowering yourself that way, then it's amazing how in one moment we're a particular way, and then in the next moment, everything can transform. And that's certainly my experience of living an intuitive life, is that things rarely make logical sense, and things can shift very quickly once we get the lesson that we need to learn. And once we heal the wound that we need to heal. And so, yeah, my suggestion is stay on your sacred sexuality path and keep letting your intuition guide you in what next do you need to explore, what next within yourself do you need to heal as a part of that journey. Because remember I was saying earlier, it's really essential as a facilitator or a practitioner to not get goal orientated with clients or participants, and to really support the journey and to meet each person where they're at on their journey. And so we also need to do that with ourselves, I think. Does that answer your question in a kind of way? Great. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful sharing. And it feels like so much of our body armoring is about those instinctual responses, like to devour our sexual excitation that we've had to dampen and suppress in order to belong, to be safe, to be loved, to be acceptable in our families and our cultures. And I think that's a really important point, that this natural sexual energy and excitation and arousal that most of us had to put a lid on in some way, that's the armoring somewhere in our bodies.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rihanna. And, you know, another to follow on from that, I think this is why it's also really essential that we're really staying connected to our inner truth rather than being guided, you know, directly by other people. Because a lot of us are carrying this sexual shame from our, you know, from our lives and our cultural conditioning, etc. But we really have to be careful that when we come into tantric communities or retreats, sexuality retreats, that we just don't flip our shamefulness into shamelessness, which it's very easy to do. And, you know, and we need to be careful that we don't sort of try and make running around naked, having sex with lots of people, something really spiritual. Now, for sure, perhaps for some people that is, I'm not saying that, you know, my way is the right way, but I think that we, as facilitators and practitioners of sexuality and Tantra, we have to be careful that we're just not encouraging people to flip their sexual shame into shamelessness, because each of us is very unique in our life journey and in our sexuality. And so it's really about us always connecting with our deep inner truth about how do I want to live as a sexual being? How do I want to evolve into my sexuality? And that might be very different to you and to other people. And it might be very different to the tantric facilitator or practitioner that you might be going to see. And that's once again about always maintaining this self-agency so that we stay connected to our inner truth, because our sexuality is in our body to take us on a journey in our life, not someone else's. And so, you know, if we're being shameful or shameless, that same wounding is still there underneath. And I think that uh, that's the place where we want to be exploring is what's my truth? What's my authenticity? What's my agency? How can I have power with regards to my sexuality? How am I leading myself in my life and in my sexual experiences? What resonates as my truth sexually? What do I need to do to support myself to move into these more full and richer sexual experiences in my life and in my relationships? These are all really essential questions that I think we as individuals need to be regularly asking ourselves, but also as if you're a tantric facilitator or a practitioner, these are also things that we need to be asking about ourselves, but also about what are we doing? How are we facilitating? And what's our motivations? What are we trying to support people to understand within themselves on our retreats?
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to return to Mariam's question, Andrew, which is, how do you think we can approach introducing a partner who is reluctant or hesitant to try tantric practices? I'm curious to hear your answer on that one.
Yeah, I find that that type of question is quite difficult to answer generally because everything is really uh, like it's relevant to the individual person that they might be talking about. And so I think the most important thing is that we begin the journey within ourselves. Often the biggest journey is from our sexuality, our genitals into our heart and into our love. And if we're able to start to vibrate our sexuality from a heart energy frequency, if we're able to vibrate our sexuality from a third eye perspective and from a pineal gland or a crown chakra perspective, then that's going to vibrationally affect the types of experiences that we're having with other people. I think sharing the benefits that we're receiving from exploring our sexuality in this way can also be really beneficial for other people. But I think each of us needs to consciously choose to move into the sacredness of our sexuality, for want of a better way to say it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But we can definitely share the benefits of the experiences that we're having with others. And perhaps that might make them curious to want to start exploring it within themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's actually a really delicate piece. And in my role as organizing many different retreats, all working with sexuality, with intimacy, with vulnerability, the one thing that I've learned over the years is never to tell anybody to come, to sign up, to cross the line. It's like I always wait for the person. It has to be a decision that comes from within the other to do the work. That's really clear to me, clearly very important.
Yeah, thank you, Rianne. It's really, a saying that I have is about attraction, not promotion. And so when someone feels that
Yeah.
spark in themselves to want to move into exploring this, then it's really coming from deep within their own self. So yeah, I think that's how you explained it was really beautiful. Thank you, Rianne.
Hmm. So Josie asks, what are your thoughts on BDSM, given that consent and internal safety is already present as a foundation?
What are my thoughts about BDSM? I think if it's something that you feel very drawn to, or if anyone feels very drawn to it, and it's supporting them in in healthy ways to experience themselves and other people, I think it's great. For me, any sort of pleasure that's healthy and supportive is really beneficial. So
Mm-hmm.
I think if there's a calling for people to explore it, then there's probably something there for them to learn and experience within themselves that could be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Josie, I'm curious about your comment, given that consent and internal safety is already present as a foundation. I'm just not sure that that is necessarily a given. And perhaps you want to come online and unmute yourself and say more about what it is that where your inquiry goes. And it's also fine if you don't want to deepen in that inquiry. But you're welcome. I invite you if it feels good.
I think for me, obviously I can only speak for myself,
Okay.
and you can never try to predict what's going on in someone else's experience. And so that's what I mean is, like, if I've done deep amounts of healing work to make sure that my nervous system is regulated, and I feel that, I give the consent, we're consenting to this interaction together, and I am in a space where I feel deeply internally regulated and safe for that experience. That's kind of just what I meant, is like a given. Obviously you there's always things that can happen with the other person that you can't predict, but I think that you can also co-regulate them into safety. And I think consciousness and awareness and presence is obviously super important in that space. So I was just wondering, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Josie, for explaining that. That was my sense, that that's what you were meaning, was provided that that consent is there and that agency is there. What do you think of BDSM? And I think that if it's for you, then great, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Shakti Shiva Academy, one of the dictums that Plato said was that eros leads to gnosis. And the suggestion is that we follow our eros, we follow our desire, because it holds a clue to something that wants to reveal or undo or unravel or take us somewhere. And so following whatever your desire is feels like a beautiful pathway to somewhere where there's richness and illumination for you. Tevi.
Yeah, so sorry, there's also just like a thought on, like, using BDSM as like a trauma healing modality. And I know this
Sorry, Josie. Yeah.
Controversial. But my personal experience is that I found a lot of healing through exploring those dynamics, and like the sub and the dom dynamics, and like finding agency, especially as a woman, and just exploring those different nuanced energetics in those spaces. And I know there can be controversy around using these things as trauma. And I guess it's always about where you're coming from, the desire to numb out into the pain, or the desire to, like, explore the dynamics of pleasure and pain. So it's just a very interesting kind of nuanced understanding of what we're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you, Josie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very rich dynamics there to explore. So Tevi asks, says, as we're speaking about empowering ourselves and awareness, she'd like to hear some thoughts around the connection between sexuality and childhood.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. I believe that we're more sexual beings than we are human beings, in the sense that it takes sex to make us. And it's been proven that in the womb, that infants can self-pleasure. And then, a lot of our understanding of our sexuality is formed in those early years of life. I was very fortunate to be mentored by someone called Betty Dodson in 2008. And she spoke a lot about this in her work and also in the conversations that I had with her, that the foundations of our general self-esteem are built upon sexual self-esteem. And sexual self-esteem is developed in early childhood. It's when we first start to develop a relationship with our own body. And it's really essential at that time that we're developing the ability to communicate, to set boundaries with others, to understand the beginnings of agency, but also to be able to connect with our body in a healthy way. And so that early stage of our development, it's really essential that we're able to create or have an experience of our body that is without shame and without the sort of negative conditioning. And of course, having age-appropriate sex education can be a really beneficial thing for children when they're growing up, right? Is to really have that age-appropriate sex education which supports a positivity around their bodies in a really healthy and safe way. And so if we can have that experience growing up, then of course, when we become adults, that's going to really help to lay a foundation of healthy sexual self-esteem. And I really think that sexual self-esteem needs to be talked about a lot more in general, because it's very rarely do I meet someone that has healthy general self-esteem with unhealthy sexual self-esteem. It's like if we're carrying wounding or shame or guilt or some kind of hurt around our sexuality, it really affects all areas of our life. It can affect our confidence in our careers, in our relationships, in how we socially interact with people. And so that, I think, is one of the really important aspects of Tantric Body De-Armouring retreats, is really supporting people to, in a sense, recondition their sexual self-esteem, so that even if they did have that wounding in their early childhood that affected their sexual self-esteem, as adults, we can still consciously rebuild our sexual self-esteem to become the platform for our general self-esteem, the way that we relate to the world around us and the experiences that we have in the world. And so it's a really good question. And I think that I personally don't have all the answers for that one, but for me, being aware that our sexual self-esteem is developed in those early years and often affected in those early years. And so as adults, I think a rite of passage for us to become adults is to really address where we have that those difficulties within our sexual self-esteem, and finding really healthy ways to, recondition it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Great. Thank you.
It's a beautiful question and a beautiful conversation. We could have a whole 90 minutes on that easily. Yeah. Gosh, there's some really beautiful questions. And if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask their question live, I invite you. You're so welcome to do that. So Gabriella asks, how does one know if an expression of their sexuality is a trauma response or is there something at a deeper level?
Sorry, it broke up a little bit.
Or then if it just, apologies. Can you see her question, Andrew? Gabriella's question?
I'll have a look.
It's like the third one from the end.
Could you just read it again?
How does one know if an expression of their sexuality is a trauma response or if it comes from their authentic self? Is there something deeper than just if it feels right or wrong?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think that at its core, this is why we need to move very slowly in our journey to expanding our sexuality, because the faster that we're trying to move in our exploration, the more difficult it is to understand where our capacity is and where we're moving out of what I call the optimal challenge zone and into being overwhelmed or re-traumatized. And so in Tantric Body De-Armouring, the optimal challenge zone is that place where we're just starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable, and we're noticing that our body is responding in a way, like our heart rate might increase a little bit, our temperature might change, our breathing might change, things like that. And these signs within our body start telling us that we're moving into something that's challenging. Now, if we're moving too fast, we're not going to notice that. And then it becomes confusing as to what is coming from trauma and what's coming from, this our authenticity or our agency, whatever you want to call it, but that truer place within ourselves. So I think slowing things down enough that we can notice the symptoms within our body, and like a symptom could be feeling pain or feeling fear or something like that, but then also noticing the signs within our body, which could be like a temperature change, or the stomach not moving when we're breathing, or rigidity in the body, something like that. So yeah, I would suggest slowing things down and continuing to ask your body, what is it that your body is wanting to have this experience for? Where's the motivation for it coming from?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison.
Slowing down. So Melandre's got her hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself, Melandre?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Andrew. Your comment on being sexual, self-aware and sexual agency is very powerful. I'm just thinking that from an educator's point of view, we have such a high level of gender-based violence in our country. And to think of sexuality on an elevated level, in a way, is beyond reach, I think, of many people who are struggling with abuse and and violence. And where does one start, apart from education and starting young in schools, but where does one start to change the narrative? What would you...
Yeah, thank you for that very important and powerful question. And, to be honest, that's really outside of the scope of what I do. And I also think it's outside of the scope of tantric retreats in general, and sexuality events in general. I think that I'm very careful nowadays to not try and make out that that Tantric Body De-Armouring or sexuality events are going to be the solution for everybody's life problems, that it's going to be the solution to heal your very deep trauma from your life experiences. I actually don't think that that's the case. And so I often recommend that people don't come to my events or don't go and have you know, tantric types of sessions, because my sense is they need to go and see a trauma therapist or someone who's very specialized in supporting people to heal this very deep wounding from, you know, political and gender and life experiences. I'm certainly not trained in that, and I've never really wanted to be trained in that. And so I think as tantric facilitators, we really have to be careful about making that clear. And so in my descriptions, it says that these retreats aren't there to specifically deal with healing your developmental or complex traumas from life, because, you know, a trauma therapist has spent a number of years of very focused and specific training to be able to support someone to do that. And I have not done that. And a lot of facilitators in the Tantra world have not done trauma therapy training. And so we really can't support people in those ways. But it's a really, really important question. And I think that's the best answer that I can give, is that there's a lot of things that people can and most probably need to do before they start considering coming on a Tantric Body De-Armouring retreat or any type of tantric or sexuality retreat. There's a lot of things that they can explore to really start to address all of these very complex issues. Thank you for the question. I think your microphone's off, Rianne.
Ah, thank
That's
you.
better. I can hear you.
We've got just under 10 minutes together, and I'm just wondering if there's anybody else who'd like to come on and share, possibly somebody who's been on retreat with you. There are a number of people on the call. If you'd like to share how the work has transformed your life or impacted your living, your loving, your capacity for pleasure, we'd welcome your sharing.
If I might, Rianne,
Also don't
I mean,
have to
of
take
course,
up
I'm
the
happy
full 10
for someone
minutes.
to come online and share something really beautiful. But while they may be considering that, I would like to share just a couple of things around
Sure.
accountability processes and also supervision, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that this is something that also needs to be talked a lot more about in the Tantra world, not just about sexual self-esteem, but also about, you know, accountability and supervision. And, you know, I finished an accountability process. It's getting close to a year and a half ago. And it was an incredibly enlightening, very painful experience. I shouldn't say painful, it was deeply confronting in so many ways, because it really holds up a mirror to, it held up a mirror to me about, you know, the shadow and the blind spots of being a facilitator and a practitioner. And I think that 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 accountability is something that we need to talk a lot more about in the Tantra world, because, you know, a lot of the sort of theme around the Tantra world is that we're free and that there's no restrictions and that we want to explore our maximum potential. And all of those things are wonderful. But I think the more we get lost in that sort of Tantra bubble, the more we lose sight of the need to be accountable and really understand power differentials and things like that. So I'm very grateful that I was able to do an accountability process, because, wow, it really opens us up to those places that we were blind to within ourselves. And so anyone that might be watching this that's feeling they need to do an accountability process or feeling drawn to it, I highly recommend going into that experience and supporting people, anyone that has a grievance towards you, to try and find some kind of healing and resolution. I think it's a really essential part of being a facilitator or a practitioner, is being open to being accountable for the mistakes and the choices that we make that might cause harm to other people. And then, of course, the importance of supervision. And once again, this is something that I never really talked about in the Tantra world, and I never really heard anyone else talking about. But I've had a supervisor for, I think now, it might be 3 or 4 years, maybe 4, as someone called Betty Martin in America, who is probably most well known for creating the incredible Wheel of Consent and her book about that. And that has been she has been an invaluable resource for me. And over the last number of years, I've actually gone through all of my retreats, because I run several different types of retreats. And we've looked at all of the exercises and meditations and the ways that I facilitate the retreat to really try and bring in this awareness of creating agency and understanding power differentials, and really creating an environment where participants can really step into their own power and start making really healthy choices for themselves. And I'm very grateful to Betty for the time that she's shared with me, and for caring more about hurting my feelings than she cares more about telling me the truth than she does about hurting my feelings. And I think that's the sign of a really good supervisor, is that they really want to tell you the truth, regardless of how uncomfortable that is. And so I would really like to see accountability processes and supervision really becoming one of the foundations of the Tantra world and the sexuality world, as really just like, it's just normal, that's what you do. And I think that it would really enrich the entire field globally. And so I just felt that it was really important that I share that, and perhaps there's not enough time now, but I think if we all start talking about accountability processes, and we all start talking about the importance of supervision, then it will become a normal part of the Tantra communities around the world. And it will enrich everything that we do. It certainly has enriched my events. It's really supported people to really have the experiences without the risk of being overwhelmed or re-traumatized. It's a very powerful journey for facilitators and practitioners to go on.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point. And learning how to stay connected with each other, with our hearts open in difference, rather than being attached to being right, really opens up a field of possibility for a lot of healing for all of us. So Andrew, we're coming close to time, and
Sure.
I'd love to just hear from Rabin. I think I've said that correctly. And then Olivia.
Hi, good
and
evening.
Then,
Sorry.
Hey, Rabin.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good evening, Andrew. It's Robin from Scotland. And Andrew is an amazing teacher. He just teaches from his heart. I followed him from 2012 for 3 years. And the way he teaches is completely from his heart, and he is present in all the time. So I just want to say thank you for being a gift to, take this forward. And your ability to teach and guide people, I think, is absolutely, I'm still learning, because what Andrew taught me then, just to go just close to him, I'm trying to do different kind of body works. And it's been amazing journey so far. So I really like to thank Andrew for his knowledge and his presence and his support to his student. I'm grateful to be in part of this conversation this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Rabin. I'm really touched by that. I'm happy for you as well that you had that positive experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Rihanna, can I share?
Hey, Olivia, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Andrew, I'd like just to share something that really stood out to me on your retreats, and that is the teaching of sexual maturity. Because, you know, me coming from like a Christian background where the teaching is very much sex is very disgusting and you should absolutely only keep it for the one you love one day, which makes no sense. To then have this, it's funny, sort of a playground where we can come as adults and yeah, learn and in a playful way show and be ourselves and open up and make mistakes and be given the opportunity by you and others there, the other facilitators, to sort of be put into accountability when our child parts tend to come out, you know, the
Yes.
parts that hide and that want to be a little bit sexually manipulative or acquiesces
Take.
or
Yes.
and I've seen you do that, you know, where it's just like, hey, this part of you is coming up right now. I think you've done it to me and other people, and how it's done with such care, but you know that it's called out in a loving way, because where else do we get this opportunity where in a loving way our distorted what do we call this, like sexual tendencies have a place to come and express and lovingly be called out. So I just want to say that is that I think it's so important and beautiful to have a space where we can practice sexual maturity, and that I do think your retreats offer that as a space. So thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm really touched by that. I'm looking forward to seeing you in October in South Africa.
Looking forward. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Rianne, I didn't know that you were going to be asking people to say
that's
nice things
beautiful,
about me.
Olivia.
Perhaps we can talk for another half an hour or so. What do you think?
We can. Absolutely. If people want to stay on the call, we can all say nice things about you. Yeah. It's can I say something nice about you?
Sure.
One of the things that I really have enjoyed is I really feel your great-hearted loving in the world, and how you have called me to my truth. And I love how you and I can disagree on things. It's not about agreeing. It's about, you've really taught me to stay connected, to stay present, to speak clearly about what I want and what I don't want, and to find the transcendent play out without wanting to be right, or sticking to be right. And it's been a profound learning. I sometimes feel like I'm a really slow learner, and being in your flight path, having the opportunity to, I think I've done 15 plus retreats with you, has been really incredible part of my own healing journey. So I really enjoy working with you, and it's such a pleasure to have you in South Africa. And I know you have a soft spot for South Africa and for South Africans.
Thank you, Rianne. And the feeling is very mutual, and I certainly know that you've called me in a lot of things over the years, and I'm really grateful for it as well. And I really value that part of our relationship. We can have that authenticity.
Yeah, really appreciate that about you.
Yeah. And, you know, it's beautiful to hear these, you know, these lovely things about me. But the reality is that I have also made a lot of mistakes over the years as a facilitator, etc. And, you know, we all make mistakes, but and that's why I wanted to touch on the accountability process earlier, and for the supervision, because that's something that facilitators and practitioners in this field really need to stay on top of, is our own ego, our own, you know, that part of us that wants to push our shadow to the side. And so I'm very grateful that I also have people like yourself that will call me on my bullshit as also, and, you know, in a loving way do that, but that really want to support my growth, because we're all here growing, right? I think if we're in a body and we're on this planet, we still have a lot to learn. And I think as facilitators, we have to not get lost in our little tantric bubbles where we're the big fish in the small pond. We need to continue to put ourselves in situations where we're also the small fish in the big pond, so that we are reminded about what that's like, and also to get that reflection of our own shadows and get reminded about the mistakes that we've made, so that we can hopefully learn from those and evolve as a result, so that they're not just wasted and that people weren't harmed without any, without a deeper or a richer purpose for it. So I think that, yeah, it's beautiful to hear lovely things, but I also think it needs to be counterbalanced with mentioning that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for this time together and all the beautiful people who've joined us. And Andrew and I invite you to join us in South Africa, 1st to the 9th of October. All the details will be in the email with the call recording tomorrow. So yeah, say yes, join us.
Yeah, I'm looking
Thank you
forward
for
to
this time
coming.
together. Thank you, Andrew, for
Thank
sharing.
you, Leanne. Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming to South Africa. We're going to be running a Tantric Body De-Armouring level 1 and then a Tantric Body De-Armouring level 2. They're back to back, so you can do one or both. And we're also going to be running some shorter events on the weekend before the level 1 begins in Cape Town. We're going to be doing a expanding female and male sexuality 1-day workshop, which will be a combination of going in depth, talking about female and male sexuality from perspectives that a lot of people haven't really heard before. And then we're also going to be going into doing some solo practices around releasing physical and emotional stress, very gentle ones, because it's only a 1-day workshop, and also some breathing exercises that then people can take home and start to practice within their tantric journey. So, and we're also going to be doing a cacao dance in Cape Town, which I am really looking forward to, because every time that I've run a cacao dance in Cape Town, it's been very amazing. And Cape Town people go quite wild. So it's a really fun experience to share with the crazy South Africans.
Yeah, and Gabriella asks, are you in Ireland next week?
Yeah. So I'm going to be in Ireland on Wednesday. I'm doing an Expanding Women's Sexuality seminar on Wednesday night in Dublin, an Expanding Men's Sexuality seminar on Thursday night in Dublin, and then a Relationship Map seminar next Friday night in Dublin. And then on the Sunday, I'm doing an extended cacao orgastic breath dance meditation 1-day workshop. So that's going to be, that's quite a full week in Ireland next week. Right, thank you, everybody.
I hope was there.
I hope that you got something from tonight's talk. It was really beautiful to share with you all. I'm sorry that we didn't get to talk to each person, but enjoy the journey one step at a time.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Wishing
you.
you a beautiful evening.